Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today we'll talk about how to rein in the threat of AI, especially the new generative AI tools that are out there. And we'll focus specifically on legal liability. That's what I want to talk about. Now, I have to say I love generative AI. It's a very, very useful tool, and there's a great deal of benefits. I use it to check my work as an editor. When I write something, I check it. I have less need for outside editing. I use it as a brainstorming technique for ideas I want to brainstorm. I even use it to help fix up reports I write for clients for my consulting firm, and to check emails I want to write, to punch them up, make them more engaging, because my natural writing style is very authentic and direct, and sometimes being too direct in my communications to clients or others is not necessarily the best thing that I want to do. I tend to be a very optimistic person, and sometimes being direct and optimistic, I'm too optimistic about how my directness will be taken in. But those are just some examples of where I use AI. It's a very useful tool, but I do recognize that it's really important to regulate the development of AI, because generative AI especially, but other forms of AI as well, have a number of serious challenges. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. So there was a Monmouth University poll which found that 55%, over half of all Americans, worry about the threat of AI to the future of humanity. The actual future of humanity. It's not like the future of their own job, but the future of humanity as a whole. And they have a reason to be so. The technological developments with AI are going faster and faster. And so ChatGPT and other generative AI tools, DALL-E, Bing, have been increasingly integrating and shaping our everyday lives. People have been striking, like the actors and writers strike, because of this. And this is a very serious issue where we really need to think about keeping AI developments in check so that they don't disturb our society too much. They can really help our society, but we want to make sure it doesn't threaten the future of our society too much, and that it doesn't cause too many social disruptions. So that the social disruptions it causes are managed, so that the negatives are managed. And so I want to think about the legal and ethical implications of AI development and how to manage their consequences effectively. And again, it's not simply me, it's not simply ordinary people. There are tons of experts who are calling for a pause even in training new AI models. So Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, and over 1,000 AI experts called for a 6-month pause. Another letter has been signed by the leaders of top AI companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Microsoft, Google, saying that there's a serious threat to the extinction of humanity by AI that's not controlled, that it's similarly a threat to nuclear weapons. It really needs to be thought about. So it's a very serious issue. And so there was even a Times article by AI researcher Eliezer Yudkowsky who wants a permanent ban and sanctions on AI research. And I'm not going that far, but I'm just painting the landscape and telling you what there's going on. So there are challenges to actually regulating AI because you need to coordinate lots of stakeholders on these proposals. And what I'm suggesting is that legal liability might be a much more effective approach that actually targets the harms that AI does without saying, oh, we just need to pause all the AI research. So I'm not saying pause AI research. I think AI research is valuable and useful, but I think the researchers who release the AI models, the developers of these AI models, they need to be held legally responsible for the damages done by their AI models. And so what do I mean by that? Well, if they are actually thinking about the legal implications, then they will slow down AI development in such a way as to make sure it's safe, so that it's aligned with human values and ethics. And so we must ensure that AI companies prioritize safety and minimize the negative consequences of AI, so to develop AI tools ethically and, of course, effectively. I talk about this more in my book, ChatGPT for Thought Leaders and Content Creators, Unlocking the Potential of Generative AI for Innovative and Effective Content Creation. So I wrote a book about this topic. I'm all for using AI for content creation, but it needs to be used ethically and legally and in a way that minimizes harm to others. So let's think about this. Legal liability would really help make sure that AI developers prioritize ethics and compliance, and that they address the negative externalities. Externalities is a term for negative externalities, for negative side effects that business activities have that affect other parties. So for example, pollution is a classic example of a negative externality. The polluter is not paying for the pollution that's coming out. Let's say it's a factory that's coming out of their smokestack. Everybody else is paying with bad health. And that's a problem because they're harming everyone's health, and that obviously has an economic harm, but they're not paying for it. So that's why that's a negative externality. And we really need to make sure that polluters, when they create negative externalities, that they pay for the health and related harms on nature, biodiversity, which in the end harms humanity. If you don't have biodiversity, then that causes a lot of damage to our societies. For example, if you kill pollinators, then that's going to be harming crops if they're not going to be pollinated. So you want to address that, and pollution needs to be taxed or somehow else be kept in check financially, and that money needs to flow to the people who are harmed by that pollution. Whether it's farmers who are not able to have their crops pollinated, whether it's people like you and I who have worse physical health, who have asthma and so on because of pollution that's coming out of factories. So that is the kind of thing I'm talking about. And the same negative externality comes in the form of harms caused by AI, and that needs to be addressed in the same way. So we need to slow down AI development so that the safety component is going to be frontlined, and there's going to be time for us to reflect on what's going on, to look at the safety components and the threat of AI, and to have some governance frameworks, not necessarily by the government, but governance frameworks, whether it's voluntary frameworks and so on, that would reduce the legal liability on AI companies if they follow these frameworks. Now, that's what I'm talking about. So we need to have legal liability to curb unchecked development of AI. We want to have consequences, legal consequences for AI that doesn't have transparency, that's irresponsible, and we want developers to prioritize AI algorithms that reduce risks of negative output for us as a society that harm us. So compliance with regulatory standards, whether it's regulatory within company, within the industry, or by the government, I don't know what's the best situation, but legal liability is what will help make it happen. So let's think about this legal liability. What are the negatives? Well, we see that AI chatbots already are spreading hate and misinformation that can harm society. And as they get better and better, they'll spread more and more. Right now, you might look at ChatGPT, ChatGPT-4, and see, well, it's pretty good, but it's not stupendous, right? But what will ChatGPT-5 be like, or ChatGPT-6? So we are seeing right now AI at its worst, at the worst it will ever be in terms of quality of output. And the quality of misinformation and hate will get worse and worse over time, especially since some companies, Meta, are spreading open source models that anybody can take and do anything they want with them. So they're releasing pretty powerful open source models. And again, I'm looking at you, Meta, that are going to cause a lot of harm to people if anyone can take them and adapt them to their needs. And think about this. Let's say a future version of like ChatGPT 6 is given the power by a company and said, okay, we want you to improve our stock. An easy way to do that would be to create a PR crisis for an opponent's stock. So it doesn't have to be hateful speech, it can be deceptive speech that creates negative information about another company, lowering their stock and raising another company's stock. And legal liability would incentivize creating technologies and refining algorithms in a way that would reduce these sorts of problems. And this is a feasible alternative to just pausing AI development, I have to say, because we in the United States are not really in the business of stopping innovation, right? That's not the kind of thing that we do over here, and it's very hard to pause innovation to align everyone. Much, much better is to use legal liability as a tool to prevent the negative consequences of unchecked innovation. So we need to punish harmful business activity, these externalities, while protecting the ability of companies to innovate effectively. So that could encourage and will encourage responsible AI development and accountability. So there are some benefits to slowing this down, because if we ensure ethical AI design, we will reduce the risk of bias, discrimination, and negative other implications for our society. And we will also help reduce technological unemployment, because it will help labor markets adapt to AI if it's slower, if it's more prioritizing safety, less hate, less misinformation, less bias coming from it. And will strengthen regulations to have effective AI governance. Again, that does not have to come from the government. When I say regulations, it can also mean internal regulations from within companies. So for example, there are a number of AI companies, top AI companies have come together and issued a statement with the White House saying that they will have a number of voluntary self-regulations that they will comply with. For example, having external audits of their technology before they release new powerful technology. I think that's great. So these are the kinds of things that I'm talking about. And that will help build trust in AI through transparency and accountability. We also want to revisit Section 230. Then this is a really important section that has enabled the modern internet of the Communications Decency Act, which shields internet platforms from liability for user-generated content. Otherwise, anyone can sue Meta, the Facebook part of Meta, for someone spreading misinformation about them on Facebook. Now, AI technology blurs the line between content creators and hosts, because ChatGPT and similar tools like Bing and so on, they actually produce the content. They're not simply hosting the content. Section 230 doesn't appear to cover AI-generated content because the law protects platforms that provide content generated by others, but not the actual providers of information that created the content. So for example, the New York Times can't just say that, well, we're not responsible for New York Times articles we put on our internet site. And so legal rulings found that platforms can't rely on Section 230 if they supply pre-populated answers. And so we want to launch legal cases. I suggest that it would be good to launch legal cases which clarify and confirm that the AI provides pre-populated answers and it's not going to be protected by Section 230. So to prevent using Section 230 to protect from legal liability. We want to I suggest that we establish AI governance bodies. So like I mentioned, the White House and the 7 private companies that are deeply on the front edge of AI development, that they should collaborate to create AI governance bodies. Again, not necessarily coming from a law, like the Congress passing a law, but the AI governance bodies through voluntary self-regulation with the, of course, support of the government and approval of the government that these are appropriate self-regulatory bodies. And these bodies can develop guidelines, regulations, best practices, and they can help monitor AI developments, ensure compliance with standards. That can help manage legal liability and help, of course, pursue innovation, which is what we really want, within appropriate ethical boundaries. And we want to encourage collaboration between developers, regulators, and ethicists within the AI space. So we have comprehensive, thorough, fair, equitable regulatory frameworks. And we can have guidelines that balance innovation and responsible AI development. We also want to educate the public. So really thinking about educating the public so the public is aware of these issues. Because if the public is not aware of the problems, well, then we won't have informed debates and the public will maybe too scared, maybe too worried about AI. So we want people to feel safe and confident that AI development is proceeding on an appropriate track. So informed discussions can drive development of appropriate and balanced regulatory frameworks and ones that the public will feel confident in. And that gets me to developing legal liability insurance. So insurance companies should offer liability insurance for AI developers, because that can incentivize the adoption of best practices and adherence to guidelines for companies that actually follow. So let's say that there's going to be a regulatory body where there's a voluntary compliance of a number of companies, like the 7 companies that came together with the White House to issue some standards for themselves that they voluntarily are opting into. Then insurance companies can say, well, the AI developers that follow these self-imposed standards that they chose to take on, we will give them liability insurance. And that reduces the financial risk of potential legal liabilities, because following these guidelines doesn't guarantee that nothing will happen, but it will minimize the likelihood of problems, right? And the guidelines can be adapted later as more powerful models come on the market and they come with additional problems. And so the insurance can say that, well, we now feel confident that we should offer insurance, and if something does happen, then we will pay out for it, but that will be the kind of thing that happens with other regulated markets, and it will promote responsible AI development. So addressing the ethical and legal implications of AI, again, we want to harness legal liability to foster good, responsible AI innovation, to focus on ethical considerations, minimize risks and threats. And so developers of AI, the companies that develop AI, regulators, and the public should collaborate to create a responsible course for developing of AI, to safeguard the best interests of humanity and to lessen the public's worries, as in that Monmouth University poll about the future of humanity. And that will help us promote a sustainable, equitable future with the very exciting developments that I'm super thrilled about in generative AI. All right, everyone. I hope you've benefited from this episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you check this out and leave a review. It helps others discover the show and it helps us improve the show. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.